So where do we start with this one? So the term witch is very loosely used to mean very different things in many different cultures and time periods. If we go by the standard definition of witch, it's a woman thought to have magical powers, usually with the aid of a demon or a familiar. There's some debate on the origin of the word being specifically referenced to women and using a word like wizard to represent a man, but witchcraft in general was something people saw as demonic, using evil forces to get what you want and things of that nature. It involved casting spells, maybe some heretic parties, who knows, an orgy or two. The list is endless. Historically made popular in early modern times when the church recognized witchcraft as a punishable offense, thus began the witch hunts and witch trials in the 15 and 1600s. People suspected of dabbling in the dark arts were rounded up and tortured or even burned at the stake. Events directly referenced in Berserk. The conviction arc sees an inquisitor named Mazgus, who is in charge of dishing out punishments to those he believes to be heretics, showcasing just how dangerous it can be when one has such devout faith that he can justify any horror against another human being, believing he has God on his side or is doing God's will. Much of this comes from fear and a lack of understanding, and truthfully, a real lack of empathy. To rid the world of those they believed to be demonic, they turned into demons themselves. Metaphorically speaking, not like Berserk where they literally turned into demons. But modern witchcraft in today's age seems to be mostly based around paganism. Please correct me if I'm wrong because I honestly don't know too much about it. I know that paganism is polytheistic, meaning multiple gods or entities viewed as such, and usually it's a lot more grounded, like connected to the earth, like the soil, water, air, and things of that nature, rather than a heaven and hell concept that most religions take. But I don't really know too much about modern witchcraft, and I'm not going to claim that I do, so let's move on from that. Witches in fiction are depicted so many different ways. The key defining feature is that they use magic, but beyond that it seems to be widely open to interpretation. We have the classic black hat, broomstick flying, ugly old hag like from Wizard of Oz. Then we have characters like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, or I guess the new Sabrina. I don't know, I haven't watched the new one because without a wisecracking talking cat, I'm really just not interested.
Dear Yuri, congratulations. I'm amazed that a person of such low intelligence could defeat me in chess. Hats off to your mother for marrying her brother.
I'll stop. After that, it gets a little mean.
One of my favorite characters from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Willow, has a very slow and fantastic development into a magic user and a witch, even falling into dark magic at one point and becoming an antagonist. It's pretty good stuff, and you should all go watch Buffy if you haven't seen it. So witches in Berserk are taken from traditional history, but given a bit of a twist. Witches are indeed human, so they do seem to be mostly female. But they are humans who have practiced and trained themselves to the point where they can use magic. And as stated, the era Berserk takes place in is very similar to the Roman Catholic Church era of the Middle Ages, so a witch being out in the open would be a very bad thing, and would ultimately lead you to getting tortured or burned at the stake. So most witches practice magic away from populated areas of humanity and in areas of the world that overlap with the Astral World. The first witches we see in the manga are Shirkei and Flora, who live in a forest, but specifically in an area where the Astral World overlaps so much that it's like their own little dimension. The Astral World contains many different layers, but you can think of it like the afterlife, where the dead and spirits wander. As well, darker parts of the Astral World harbor the fears of mankind and creatures like trolls, ogres, and so on. But shallow layers of the Astral World can be utilized by witches as places where they can live safely, practice magic, and not live in fear of the outside world's views. Witches tend to live with nature peacefully, not disrupting things for their own desires. When Shirkei leaves the forest and sees all the trees that were torn down to make warships on the docks of Vertanis, she breaks down in tears in that humanity has torn up what is natural to make unnatural weapons of war. The area of the Astral World where Shirkei and Flora resided was protected from the outside world in several ways. First of all, it was very unlikely that any human in the physical world could enter the Astral World, as the more closed off you are to the idea of the supernatural and magical things, the less likely you are to be able to perceive them. Such as an adult living in a world where the Holy See religion has been indoctrinated in you from youth, you aren't going to believe that you can just wander into the Astral World. It's to the point where those devoutly religious can't even see an elf in front of their face. And I just love using this image of Puck when I explain that because it's just too perfect. So we have that aspect in the benefit of witches not being found, But in this specific instance, we also have a barrier set up by Flora who could sense when people pass through. And finally, they had guardian golems there to protect the mansion itself. Check out my monster manual on golems for all you need to know about how they work. But besides the areas of the Astral World embedded deep within woods, we also have the island of Elf Helm, located somewhere in the ocean, and the island of Skelling. Elf Helm was an area of the Astral World where more good-natured astral creatures resided, all under the rule of the Flower Storm monarch Danon. And she is a sight to behold, let me tell you. But it's full of creatures like elves, fauns, dwarves, unicorns, and all those fun-loving monsters that don't want to rape you. See, Berserk is nice sometimes. And on this island, other witches live with these creatures in a land of peace and practice their skills of magic in seclusion from the judgmental world. Though witches in Berserk are depicted as good-natured, and those close to nature, they are also still human, so jealousy and arrogance can also become factors. The witch Morta, and oh god, Morta, she is the big titty goth GF of our dreams, but she does seem to hold a bit of a conceited attitude when it comes to her skills, even invoking a Wicker Man, which was considered to be taboo for them to utilize. There's a couple other taboo things I'd like to do with Morta, but let's move on. There's also this old man named Gendrig, who is seemingly the most powerful magic user around that's a human. Someone who must have spent his entire life learning the ways of magic, as he can seem to cast a spell without a ritual, creating rain, while just sitting on his goat like a boss. So witches have been shown in various age ranges, but it's stated that the earlier to begin magic training, the better, as the younger you are, the more open you are to the supernatural. As you grow up, you become blinded to it, which is a great metaphor for life in general, because how many stuck-up adults do you know that need to learn to embrace their inner child a little bit more? Anyway, witches have plenty of powers and abilities, being able to utilize magic, so let's get into a few. The basis of magic in Berserk has to do with entering the Astral World and requesting assistance from particular spirits that you will temporarily channel through your body to invoke their power. So let me explain. You have your physical body, but there's also your ethereal self that exists simultaneously within it. And you can think of that as like your soul, for lack of a better word. And since the physical and astral worlds overlap, you tap into your ethereal self in the astral world, and then use your consciousness to control it and give it shape, thus creating a luminous body. It's like your spirit now in the form of your physical self that's able to wander the astral world freely, while your actual physical body stays stationary. You then find the spirit you wish to borrow power from. Oftentimes, this comes from the 4 elemental kings. Again, I already did a monster manual on them, so check that out for all that information. The spirit will then come with you to your physical body, and as you stay in a trance-like state, the power of the spirit will take hold, and you momentarily have some sweet superpowers. It's also fairly dangerous to use, as your consciousness could get lost in the astral world, leaving your body in a paralysis-like state indefinitely. This is why magic takes lots of training and work, and again, it's best to start the training when you're very young. A list of other powers they've been shown to use are, of course, creating golems, using a totem and creating them out of inanimate materials. They could draw talismans to ward off evil spirits. In particular, drawing one on top of the brand of sacrifice on Guts and Casca's bodies, weakening their original effect of drawing dark spirits to them. Protection barriers and various spells of that nature, all the way from a small protection circle to enveloping an entire area in a protective energy that will burn up or eviscerate any evil entity that tries to enter it. Thought transference is another one, by a witch giving a person a piece of their hair. They can all speak to each other telepathically, which is very handy for relaying information while in different areas. They could also control familiars, as in plants and animals. Shurikei and Fernies are shown controlling thorn vines as if they were snakes. Now, witches in particular haven't really been shown controlling animals, but there has been in the form of the Bashakas controlled by the Kushan style of magic, but that's a little bit different, and I'll get into that in its own video. Witches can also sense and lock onto someone's ode. And once again, plugging yet another video, I do a full deep dive analysis into ode into another video, so check that out, but it's essentially one's life force. It's their ki, their energy, a signature energy that is specific to that individual. A witch can focus and tap into this, able to pinpoint where a person is if they can lock onto it. They could even enter your mind to an extent, as in Guts' case, be able to calm you down or bring you back to a neutral state should you get too enraged or misguided. They can even perform a Jedi-like mind trick and mask their own ode in the presence from you to be seemingly invisible. A witch or magic user is also more likely to be in the possession of magical or enchanted items, as seen in the series. The Sylph Cloak, the Salamander Dagger, and even the Berserker Armor all came from witches who were holding on to it. So if you had to fight a witch, Well, good news is, particular spells like energy barriers won't work on you since you're a physical being and not evil. But pretty much everything else will. Humans are super susceptible to spells even if they aren't believers. So if a witch channels an elemental power like fire or water, you could be burned alive or washed away in a flood. They wouldn't even need to be nearby you to fight you, as they could animate golems or just use a familiar like a plant or animal to attack you. As an average person, your best bet would be to get an attack of opportunity or attack first. Enacting a spell takes time, so if you don't allow them that time, you might have a chance in killing them. A witch, as seen in Berserk, is only human, so they have all the standard vulnerabilities that any human would. That is, unless they have the time to put on a protection spell or force field. Strike while the iron is hot, if you will, and put them down quick. Otherwise, you're pretty much screwed. However, if they are distracted or maybe focusing a spell on something else, their body lies in a trance-like state. It's defenseless while they control their luminous body in the Astral World. They would be easy to kill off if no one else is protecting them and the spell isn't being focused on you. It has also been yet to seen in the manga what it would be like for a witch to face off against another witch. Again, unless you count the Kushan magic users, but I would assume it would be a matter of who could get the spell off first. Or perhaps the elementals and other spirits you would borrow power from might be able to choose the side it wishes to aid. It's not very clear, but I would say that quickness is the prime factor in a witch battle. Don't allow them the prep time and get the job done fast. Looking at Mortar once more, we all know I'd be over fast. I mean 5-minute minimum, but still fast. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this video of this Monster Manual edition of Witches. Thank you for being here. Please give the video a like, a thumbs up, as it does really help me out. I would very much appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel if you want to stick around for more anime, manga, and other nonsense. And also check in the description below. Check out my Patreon. See if any of those options would be interesting to you. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you in the next Monster Manual.